Hello. Okay, I'll wait a little bit more before I continue to give others chance to join. Hi, thank you for joining. How's the weather where you're from? Hello. Hi. Okay. Again, I'll wait a little bit more to give others chance to join, if you don't mind. Okay, so today we're welcoming spring. Hi, Dawn. By painting a tulip. Okay, actually in the photo there are two tulips, but today we'll focus on the one that's big, the huge one. Okay, this one. Okay, so after the live I'll be sharing this photo so that you can have it as your reference photo, and I'll also be sharing a sketch of it so that you can use it. You can save it and then you can print it out. You can use it for tracing, or you can use it as a guide, since usually when I sketch, even for complicated subjects, I don't have to draw all the tiniest lines, just really the major lines that I feel are important for guiding me what to paint. Hello, Jan. Thank you for joining. Beautiful weather. Oh, great. Here on my side of the world, it's summer, so it's getting hot. So it's time for high electric bills. Okay, so today, again, just for those who joined later, we'll be doing this orchid, which you probably saw from the event. Okay, so I chose this one because it's a more open orchid, sorry, tulip, sorry. Last week was orchid. Okay, this tulip, because it's more open, and at the background you see a more closed version of the tulip, but not so detailed. So we'll focus on this more detailed one so that you can get to see how I do my step-by-step. Okay, so just like last week, if you want to see other flower lives, last week we did an orchid, so you can check that out too. Sorry, people from the group are calling, so if you don't mind, I'll just copy the event just in case they don't know where to join. Okay, stay with me. Sometimes it doesn't apparently show up for some, so I'll just send it to them via messenger so that they can join us. So I hope you don't mind. I'll just, okay, people have been calling. Okay, hi Joe. All right, so today I just prepared several palettes. So I have the Allegro. So this is one of our palettes which has a lot of the warm colors that that are so useful when you like to paint florals. So here's the color. Here are the colors. Okay, so this is Allegro. And I also prepared one of our new palettes, which is not out yet, but will soon be, the Moderno. So Moderno has the more modern colors. So I chose it because it has the opera pink as well, that I will probably be using for this tulip. Okay, so I haven't shared the sketch yet, but just wait for it after the live. In maybe 5 to 10 minutes after the live, I'll be sharing it, so you can use it, and it's free for you to save and to print out and whatever. Okay, so I'm going to flip down now the camera so you can see my my desk, and then we can start painting. Okay. Okay, so here's my desk. Okay, let me just adjust this so that it doesn't point the wrong way. Okay, so lots of adjustments. Stay with me just so you can have a better view. All right, so okay, I hope you can see it. So I've already sketched it out previously before I started. So as you can see, it's more lines, more sketch than usual, but with more detailed works, you really need to add the important details that you don't want to get lost. But as you can see, I sketch it lightly. So try to sketch it lightly, and also if you sketched too dark, if you feel like it's too dark and it will probably show up later, especially if the colors aren't very deep, then go over it with your kneaded eraser or whatever eraser you have. Just don't go overboard where you will ruin the sizing of your paper. Okay, so just remove too dark lines so that they won't show up later. So a lot really don't like the lines. Personally, me, I don't mind a lines showing up here and there, but this is a matter of preference. So if you don't like the lines to show up, go over it with your eraser. Okay, me personally, I like to use this kneaded eraser because it's kind on the paper, and you can even just roll it on the paper like so and erase evenly. Okay, so while we're doing this, if you have any questions while I'm painting, just ask away. All right, don't be shy. I'm here to not just show you, but also to help guide you if you have any questions or if there's something not clear while I'm doing this. So just ask away. Okay, so let me zoom now so that you can see it closer. Okay, there you go. So I'm just preparing these two palettes so that I have them ready. So I have the Opera Pink right here. So these two palettes, these palettes of ours are for beginners. So they have more colors, 24 colors in one set, and in half pans. This is our more professional line. So this is how it looks like, and it has 12 colors. Okay. Some colors have flipped around, so let me just... Okay, we won't need them. So I'm just going to focus on the Opera Pink. I will get here. Okay, and then the Purell Scarlet, just in case. So this is what I do with sets that you can pop out the colors. I pop them out if I'm not going to use a lot, so that I can just set them aside and I don't have to have the whole case taking up space, especially if I'm going to go back and forth. Okay, so this is how the Opera Pink looks like. Okay, so it's a really vibrant, nice pink. Okay, so you have your... Okay, and I'm going... Usually when I paint flowers, I like to use brushes that have some softness to them, but also snap back into shape. Okay, so I'll start with this number 7 round brush from the Turner collection. So it's a squirrel and synthetic mix. So the squirrel hair gives it that softness that you need to manipulate around, especially if you're doing petals and such, and you want to be able to softly go through the shapes. But at the same time, it snaps back into shape as soon as you release it. Okay, so this is my preference. Some like a softer softer hair, some like snappier. So for me, this is the perfect mid brush between the two. Okay, so let me just move this forward. Okay, I hope the light is bright enough. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so here I'll show you again quickly the photo. Okay, so again, when we do watercolor, we like to start with the lighter colors. So let's start with the center. Okay, we have yellow at the center. So I'm going to go and get these two. Okay, so this is Hansa Yellow and New Gamboge. Okay, so Hansa Yellow is paler, but a little bit warm, but not too warm. So it's really the perfect mid yellow that you want to have in your palette. It's usually the yellow that I get if I want to bring just maybe 1 or 2 yellows. One of them would be Hansa yellow or cadmium yellow. So they're just the nice, more neutral kind of yellow. Okay, and then since the flower at the middle is warmer, I also need the gamboge for later. But for now, let me just apply a overall yellow to all the center yellow parts right here. So I just start with that. So remember, we'll do this in layers. So when you look at the reference photo later, you will see that, well, it's not really bright yellow, but it has some of it. So we want that to show. And since watercolor is transparent, it will show up even underneath all the warmer yellow that you will add later. Okay, so just keep checking your reference photo to see if you're getting things right or not. Okay, so yeah, like Joe said, sometimes you don't get the notification, so bummer. Facebook does that. Sometimes odd things just happen. Like every time I start a live, it gives me a problem with my camera settings. Okay, so I almost painted this yellow and it's not. Oops. Okay, so lift it up. Okay, you can still lift. That's why you should always have an absorbent material. So it can be paper towel, it can be like the sponge here in one of our palettes, so that you can just, you know, lift your excess water, pigment, or if you're making corrections, it's just there. Okay, but personally, I'm more comfortable using a paper towel. Okay, so once I have that down, the center is also a very pale yellow, so I'm also going to do that, but I will add water, so it's a lighter shade. Okay, so it's like a very, very light yellow, creamy yellow here at the center. So don't go crazy if something is white and you paint it, unless you're a traditionalist. You can add white later. Okay, so but if you like to paint like purely watercolor, then you have to leave the white. You have to paint around the paper, and that's the white. But if you don't mind doing a little bit of mixed media by adding highlights, then you can always add the tiny highlights later using gouache or acrylic or ink. Okay, so I have that down, and now I actually missed one. Okay, let me just add this. Sometimes when there are so many details, you can really get lost or get confused. So take your time. Okay, when you do this, do it little by little, so you don't make terrible mistakes that will be hard to correct later on. Like this one apparently shouldn't be that deep, so you can wet it. Okay, thankfully Hansa yellow isn't staining, so it's easy to lift. So wet it, wipe the pigment that you pick up on your paper towel, or you can also wet it and then dab your paper towel in that section to lift it up, like so. Okay, so yes, true. Q-tips can also be totally used. Just keep in mind that sometimes it might leave fibers, cotton fibers. So just watch out for little fibers that might get left suddenly Okay, because sometimes when cotton fiber gets left on the paper and then while it's still wet and you're moving around the paint, maybe you're working on your project, it will also move around paint. Okay, so as long as you don't leave any cotton fibers, then all is good. Okay, so once you have the yellow down, now we can move on to the pink. Okay, so thankfully Moderna has a pink ready. Okay, this palette is perfect because typical limited palettes of watercolors won't have this bright pink because this is a more modern color. But this Moderno, which is one of our new palettes, has this opera rose, opera pink, just for that specific need. Okay, so I will start with a washed out opera pink. Again, always start with lighter washes, lighter colors, so that you can build up to what you're looking for. Okay, so I'm going to start at the edges. Add water. And spread the color around. Okay, so again, now I'm painting wet and dry. Wet and dry is my go-to technique when I'm working realistically, because it gives you the best kind of control over your work, over the water, over the pigment, over anything. So if you're doing a more loose kind of floral painting, you will do a lot of loose strokes and wet on wet. But for more realistic work, I really suggest to work in layers and also to paint wet on dry. Okay, so it's an adjustment if you're used to wet on wet, but it's really the best way so that you have more control over your painting. Okay, so I apply the mixture or the color if you didn't have to mix it, and just spread the color around by adding water so I can get a lighter color. Okay, so I'm painting around this because this has a white streak, a white line. So again, before doing any of this, erase the pencil marks that you don't want to show up. So in my case, I don't mind. I prefer it. But if you do, then better remove it. Okay, so this part is white, so you can also lift that. Oopsies. Okay, so if you make this mistake, just lift it. Okay, that's the nice thing with nice thick paper, is it's very forgiving. You can totally scrub your brush over it and it won't ruin the paper. The brushes are soft anyway, so it's hard to ruin the paper. So that's the one bright thing, besides of course the nice thickness that won't buckle, is it's also going to be very kind when you're doing corrections and lifting and such. Okay, so this is not such a big boo-boo because it's going to be covered up later. This part will be darker. Okay, so once you have that, so for some parts that you want lighter, you can again just go over with your wet clean brush over it and just lift it up. Okay, sometimes when you're so into your work, or where you're distracted like me, you forget to leave some parts white. But as you can see, it can still be corrected. Alright, so the outer parts are darker and the center parts are lighter, white, but some parts are a tad bit warmer. So that's why we need to work in layers. Okay, so we're starting with laying the basic tones down, separating each part to their basics, and then we will add the extra values later on. Okay, so your first layer will be very light, just light layers of everything that you need. And then as you keep adding layers, parts that need deeper values will start to have them, and you just build towards the value that you're looking for. Okay, so now I'm just fading this to white. I don't want to overdo it, like what I did here. Okay, so I'm working now. I'm starting to work from here to here because I'm right-handed, so I won't smudge the parts that might still be wet. Again, starting from the outer, and then adding water and spreading it inwards. Okay, and keep checking your reference photo. So this part is white, so I'm just going to fade this slowly at the edges so it's not like a sudden change of color. Okay, so don't stress. Again, you can always add the whites, little whites later on if you painted over them and you can't lift the color out, or you don't like painting around them. Okay, so let's finish all the petals. You can also use a gel pen, a white gel pen. I also have that handy for little lines, sometimes the edges of the flowers. For example, you want to have a white halo around. You can also use your marker, your whatever you have on hand. Some people use white ink, so again, depending on your comfort zone. In my case, I use white gouache or a white gel pen. So mine looks like, okay, where are you? Okay, mine looks like this. Okay, so it's a Jelly Roll white gel pen like this. Okay, so the one big difference that I experience when I'm using cheaper paper and better paper, like cold press 300 GSM, is that I can still move around details even if I leave it for a few seconds. That is quite hard to do with cheaper paper. Sometimes they just immediately suck in the color and it's hard to move them. But with the good thick paper, it gives me more time to work with the details and fixing things. So if you're getting towards that part of your journey in watercolor where you feel some frustration with your paper, I suggest you also try out, buy some nice paper. You can buy it in a sheet. I used to do that before. I would buy a sheet and then I would cut it up into smaller pieces. You can always paint small just to be able to try it out, or some brands even carry them in postcard size. So at least you can try the difference and see for yourself, because it really does make a difference. Okay, so this is quite detailed. So as you can see, I'm down to the inner parts where the pink is here and there. It's not wide like these bigger petals. So take your time when you do this. Here I'm in the smaller petals inside where the pink greatly varies, even on one side of the petal. So especially this part where there are just really white, very white parts, and I want to leave them white. So I'm very careful not to paint over them so that I don't have to fix so much later. So how are you guys doing? How's your spring? Is it warmer? Okay, so these petals are curled like so. So the edges are have a bit of white on them, the underside. So I'm starting with the inner part of the petal, and we'll work on the outer part later. So I'll wait first for the inner part to dry before I work on the outer part, because it has a white edging all around. Okay, so if you want your edges to remain crisp, like these two areas, don't work on them at the same time. Work on one part first, and then wait for that part to dry, fully dry, before working on this other part, so that the edges won't blend with each other and will remain crisp. So that's the one thing that you have to fight with yourself, is to wait for it to dry, to be patient, because that's also a problem with me before. I forget to wait for things to fully dry, and instead of having a crisp edge, they end up blending with each other and will actually take more time to correct. So just, I don't know, brew some coffee, make some tea, wait for it to dry, and then come back to it, so that you won't give yourself a harder time fixing things. Okay, so I'm blurring the edges. Again, when I apply my color, I just dab my brush on in my jar of water, and then I add it to the edges and pull the color, so I allow it to be softened. Okay, I'll zoom in further so that you can see better. Okay, there you go. Okay, so as you can see, my mixture here is just tiny, and because I already have the color ready, so I don't need to keep mixing the specific color I need. But if I know I'm going to be using a lot of it and I don't have a color ready, I would create a big puddle of that mixture, just so I don't have to always keep mixing and trying to match the exact color. Okay, now I'm going to work on the, okay, this is dry, that's good. So I'm going to work on the edge. So this edge, this is the petal, this is the inner part, it's curled. So I'm now working on the curled part, bottom, and the edge has a white edge. So I'm starting at the bottom and making sure to leave that light edging. So it doesn't have to be like a white streak like that perfectly. You can, some parts can lose their white, that's fine. So flowers are organic, and they don't all have to look the same. So that's the nice thing when doing flowers. Even if you do them realistically, you don't have to be doing each one perfectly the same. So that's a little bit of freedom. Okay, so even with the orchid I did before, it's not exactly the same as the reference photo. Maybe 70 to 80% the same, and for me that's okay. If you're not aiming for a hyper-realistic work, then that's fine already. Okay, so having that white edge, as what I see also in the reference photo right here, also helps define the curve of the petal. Okay, so little details like that you actually want to keep and work on, because for realistic work, they really help with you know, showing you what the petal really is. Is it open? Is it curled a little bit? Is it very close? So some details are important to maintain. Oh yeah, yes, yes, you can totally do that. We did that back in school. We got big pieces of paper and cut them up, or cut them up and then folded, and then you can stitch your own sketch pad. So it's really great because you can even choose the kind of paper that you want to create your very own sketch pad, and even the size. So that's also a nice experience, creating your own and binding your own sketch pad. Okay, so now again, since the outer layers, the inner layers are dry, I can again work on the outer layers. So again, I'll start here at the outer edges, at the bottom of the curl, and then work towards the center, leaving a white rim or white edge. Okay, so take your time when you do this. Switch to a smaller brush if you have more difficulty controlling your brush. Maybe your hand shakes a bit, so that's fine. You can switch to a smaller brush to help you out. That way, even if your hand is shaking, it'll be much harder to go over the sections that you're doing. Sometimes when I overwork my hands, they do shake a lot. So what I do is I use a smaller brush. Okay, so just like what I did here, I left a white edge. So do that for all the petals that have a curled edge. Okay, so don't worry about the sketch. I will share the sketch after, along with the more closed tulip at the back. Up to you if you want to do just this one or do the both of them. Also, another thing is if you have trouble doing little details, is to paint it bigger, because that way the little details will also become larger, because you're painting on a larger scale. So there's always little adjustments that you can do to help you out. So for this one, the white parts are very fine and much harder to maintain. But if you blow this up maybe twice the size, it will already be much easier to handle. Okay, so this is the last outer part. So we're going to be finished with our first layer soon. Okay, so this part, you don't really see the white edge because this part is also white. So the white edge of this has blended into the white section of the inner part. So I can just relax on this part. And halfway through the petal, it becomes lighter. So I will lighten it, add water to the edge to soften it. And then on the other side, the white edge is more visible. So I will work towards that from the bottom. And then go upwards and add water to the edge to soften. Okay, so step by step. Painting realistically, it just takes more time and more patience. But it's not too hard, promise. So you just really train yourself to work on things by following a process and doing it step by step. Okay, so as you can see, the first layer is done. Very pale, still far from the original, which is this. Okay, so we will add the next layers now. Okay, so again, just using the same pink, we'll now just use a more saturated mix of it. Okay, so just put more pigment in your water, and just have paper ready, scratch paper, just so you can test Good luck, Joe. I hope, yes, that Tornado Alley doesn't live up to its name. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I like it. It's a darker pink. So I will start with this. Okay, I will work with this big petal first. Okay, so let me just put the reference photo on the side so you can see it. Okay, I hope you can slightly see it, right? Okay, so this is the reference photo. Okay, so I'm going to start with this one. Okay, so it has a dark section here, so I apply this to the edge of the petal. And then as it goes there, it becomes lighter. So I'll dip my brush in water and add it to the edge. Dip it again, add to the edge. So by slowly adding water, little by little, I'm making it go from dark to light, but very softly and very subtly. Okay, so just do that. Just add water to the edge, pull the color outwards, and here I'm adding the lines. I don't know if they will really show up once it's dry, but I can always add more later. Okay, I'm going to do it to the other side as well here, but painting around this small part where it's white. This is from another petal, so I'm carefully painting around that to maintain the white section. Okay, so that's dark enough. Now I'm going to dip my brush again in the water and then add water to the edges. Dip again, add water. So as you add more water, the amount of pigment also decreases. So for some parts that you need to lighten, just lift that color up and wipe it on your paper towel or whatever absorbent material you're using. So don't forget to leave the white sections white. Then I will add the streaks of color. Okay, so this doesn't have to be ultra perfect. For now, that's okay. I'm going to leave it like that. And for the center area, there's a little bit of darker areas as well where the petal sort of folds in slightly. So there's a bit of a darker shade here. So I will add that. And then it also fades. So I will add water to the edge. More water. Okay, so I feel like I did that too soon, so I'm going to add more pigment. Okay, so while everything is still wet, you can still drop in, color. Adjust the value. Did you make it too light? It's still wet. Add more. Or you can always just leave it as it is and then come back to it later with another layer. So there's so many ways that you can fix the values of your work. Okay, so on the same side, it has the same effect. There's a bit of a darker shade here at the middle. So I will add that. So try to follow the general shape of the shadow or value, and then soften the edges for the gradation of the color. Again, if you feel like it's too light and the paper is still wet, just add more pigment. Just drop it in with your brush, move it towards the areas that you want it to add more color to. Okay, so now this petal is halfway done, or maybe more than halfway. I'm gonna add more pink because it's not this light. And then later I will add the deeper grooves, the deeper streaks, once everything has dried. Okay, so you will do the same for all the petals around. So it's actually with flowers, with painting realistic flowers, all the petals will have a quite similar way of painting them. If they look, they probably look quite similar to each other, very minor differences. So the technique will be the same. So you just have to actually keep repeating the same technique that you did for one petal for all the petals. Okay. Okay, so I just prepared extra mixture on the side. Now I'm going to start with the deeper areas I see. And there's like a very light pink streak in the middle. So I'm painting around it already, just so I don't paint over it. Okay, so I'm adding now color and then adding water to the edges, again to allow it to softly blend towards the first layer that we did earlier. So it's actually much easier because unlike doing this with skin, for example, with flowers, they will just seem to blend together. Okay, now let's do the other side. A little bit of deeper color right here. Okay, and then spread it outwards, adding water to the tip. So if you see my hand, I'm going back and forth to my mixture, to my water, to my paper towel. So a lot of that will be happening when you're doing more detailed work. A lot of lifting, adding little bits, adding more pigment, adding more water. Okay, so just at the beginning, you will be maybe, if you're not used to painting flowers that are heavily detailed, it will feel intimidating or discouraging. But just take it slowly, bit by bit, and really you can finish it. Okay, there's no deadline anyway. You can finish it in a month, in a week, whatever you feel like. Okay, so now going back to my sketch. Wait, there's something weird about my sketch. Okay, so this should be one flower. So I'm gonna fix this right now. Okay, there you go. Then there's a deeper section again. Look for the deeper parts. Add your deepest mixture there. But remember, this will dry lighter more often than not, so you might have to add extra layers later on. Okay, so just, that's part of it, so don't stress. Okay, and then again, add water to the edges. So this part has a wider, deeper section, so I'm just going to drop in extra pigment. And there's a very pale pink edge, so I'm just going to leave that, paint around it. Okay, add water to the edges for the transition. Okay, so there you go. Don't forget to leave the white sections white, or you can use white gouache later to add them in if you were overzealous with painting your pinks, which I will probably do for some parts, but let's leave that for last. Okay. So we have a darker section here as well. So just prepare your mixture in your mixing area so that you can have more control over your mixtures, their intensities. That way you're not having to fix everything on your work. Okay, so just keep checking your reference photo, just, you know, as a basic guide. But again, you don't have to follow everything in it. Like, you don't have to follow every single line. Just the main values and details. Okay, so as you can see, it's already coming together. 1/3 of the petals are done. So you can even stop at this intensity if you want a paler tulip, or you can keep adding more layers if you want to follow the intensity on your reference photo. Again, painting is really very subjective. So what you like and what you want to have as your finished work is really up to you. So you don't have to paint exactly like how I'm doing it. You know, just maybe the basic techniques I'm using. But again, your final work is up to you. Okay, so it's still what you like will still come into things. That is why I actually really enjoyed my classes in school. For example, for when we were doing still life or figure paint or figure drawing, because even though you're painting the same subject, if you go around, you end up with very different finished effects. Everyone has their own style of drawing or painting things, so it's really a wonderful experience. So if you have like a group of friends, you can have like a group still life. It's very fun. Okay, so again, start with the areas with most intensity, and then pull the color towards the areas that are lighter. Don't forget to leave the whiter sections white, especially if they're wide swatches of white. So you don't have to do a lot of white painting later. Okay, so again, this is the second layer, and you can do maybe 1 or 2 more layers actually, depending on how much detail and how much intensity you want with your work. So normally I go from 3 to 5 layers when I'm working in a realistic way. So maybe you can start with 3, and then you can always go back to it later if you feel like, if you decide that you want to add more to it. But with 3 layers, you can already have a sort of finished look already. Again, it's subjective depending on what you want at the end of the day. Okay, and then I'm just adding the little bits of details. So when you're painting towards a realistic finish, you really want to have the varying values that you see. You want to have darker sections and the very light sections. You want to have that range. So if you don't have very dark parts and very light parts, that's really going to um, work against you when you're going for a more realistic or more three-dimensional form. So if you're aiming for a very three-dimensional form or volume, then you want to really put in your darks and your lights. So that's why it's really very helpful to work in layers. That way you can add and you can keep working towards the intensities that you need. So bit by bit, okay? So now I'm going to add this very deep section right here. Some people actually like to leave white spots here and there. That's also a preference. I have a friend who paints like that. There are just white spots peeking through here and there. It also kind of gives the whole work like some breathing room. So, you know, there are preferences like that as well. So remember, no two people will paint the same, and you shouldn't you know, aim for that, to paint exactly the same as somebody. Sorry, maybe to start off with, because you know you're learning, you're trying to follow, but later on, don't be shy about, you know, doing your own experiments, doing your own style. Okay, that's really best if you try to enjoy it and try to put in your own preferences. Okay, so if you have any questions, just ask away, guys. Okay, what flower do you think you've been painting for so long that you've already sort of mastered it, or you're so comfortable painting it? Do you have that one flower that you are just so fond of that you've become so expert at painting it? Like you don't get nervous anymore starting out when you're painting that flower? For me, I think it would be roses. For the longest time, I've always painted roses, starting with drawing them, of course, as a child. You know, the going around in circles, wiggly circles. Okay, so that's done. So now I'm going to work on the edges, making them deeper, just like how I did with the petals inside. I'm now going to add the darker values as well on the edges, the underside of the petals, the curling sections. Okay, so let me just, again, I keep referring to my reference photo so I don't get lost. At the start of things, when everything is still unclear, you're gonna be confused a lot, but as you know, as the details come together, it will be much easier. Yeah, right? Roses are, I think, one of the kindest on us who learn to do florals, because you can totally start with abstract roses. Not to worry, I too have difficulty painting in a more abstract fashion. As you can see, I'm more comfortable painting with more detail, more realistic. Loose painting is not very familiar for me. It's not my go-to way. That's why I've been forcing myself to try painting more loosely on my own. So maybe that's your personal abstract style, Linda. A more vibrant abstract. Who knows, right? You might develop your own niche style. Sometimes it might just be we're discovering something that's perfect for us, for our technique. Okay, so I'm adding again more intensity and then softening the edges. Okay, so again, just add water to the edges. With really beautiful paper, I can say it is so much easier. When I do this with cheaper paper, which I do a lot when I'm practicing because I don't want to waste my good paper. I'm so thrifty. I'm too thrifty sometimes. It's so much harder. So when I actually, force myself to use my nice paper, I can really feel the difference. Like, everything is just so much easier to work with. Yes, you never know. All the great artists, all first works that they pioneered in, their styles weren't really liked, right? Not everyone had, a good experience. I mean, look at Van Gogh. Nobody really liked his work, but isn't it so, aren't they so beautiful? I mean, imagine he actually thought his, I read it in his letters to his brother, he actually thought that his Starry Night was like a failure. So I'm like, wow, I hope I also have a failure like that. So can you just imagine? So what may be a failure for you at the moment might be, actually something awesome that you just, didn't see. Because we are actually our own worst critics, really. I believe that. Okay, so I'm also adding the center. So the petals of the tulips, they have a center that's like dipping in a bit. So it gives the deeper lines, streaks. So here and there it shows up. Some petals, they're not so evident, just vague lines like this. But for some, they have deeper grooves, deeper color. So just try to add them, but not too much. And even if you do feel like it's too dark, you can go over it with your wet brush and soften it. Okay, so it's not unsalvageable. Okay, so now the petals are nearly there. I'm now going to add the streaks that I'm talking about at the center of the petals. So take some time doing this. So far, I've just used one brush. So sometimes I just use 1 to 3 brushes, really, if there are no tiny details that I need to switch around. But feel free to switch around brushes, especially if you want to have more control. Switch to a smaller brush, switch to a finer brush. So with petals, I really prefer to have a brush with some softness to it. Okay, so this is the center petal with a slight curl. So I'm also adding that. And now I'm adding the streak just with the tip of my brush. So I'm not doing the full line, as you can see. You can also do this, like a disappearing line. So you don't have to draw a whole full straight line. You can have some of the edges disappearing and then reappearing with some spacing. It also gives it a softer look. But your eyes will connect them. That's the nice thing about the eyes, the illusion, the optical illusion. So even if it's not a whole complete line that you did, somehow the eye, just connects them and it becomes complete. So take advantage of that also when you're painting. especially for example when you're painting portraits and there's teeth, right? Typically people will just like draw each line that of the teeth, the divide between them, which would actually look really very weird after. So make use of some disappearing lines here and there. You don't have to outline everything, because the eye actually takes care of a lot of the filling in of the details. Okay, so some lines here, there, additional deepening here, there. So as your layers progress, you won't be adding color to whole sections, just bits by bits here and there, just to add extra texture, extra value, shadowing, things like that. So you really work towards working on bigger sections and then slowly working on the details. Okay, so that's why just take your time and do it step by step. Okay, so here I'm looking at my reference photo and checking which areas have an even deeper bursts of color, and I add them. Okay, so just add, again, just do what I do. Just add water to the edges. Keep adding water depending on how light you want it to move. Okay, so here you can also add the texture if you want, using your brush. If you want to add the lines, go ahead. In my case, I'm not going to add it everywhere. Just suggestions here and there. So I'm painting realistically, but not hyper realistically. Okay, so just little suggestions, and already it's enough. So again, a darker streak here. So I will add that, and then again soften. Okay. Here too. So take your time. Okay, when you do this, it really helps a lot if you take your time, because you can make better judgments and work on it bit by bit. No pressure. Okay, so just a few more intense areas, and I'll be doing the center. Okay, so it's gonna take time, but as you can see, it's quite doable. You can do it. I hope you try this out, guys. I mean, it's really a beautiful flower. So just deepening some sections that have a deeper color. So if you have a hard time with the values, one suggestion that's always been really effective is you turn your photo to black and white. Okay, so there are apps for that. You can make your color into black and white. That way, instead of seeing color, you'll be able to see values, and then you can just translate that into the colors that you need to achieve that. But at least you can get a better gauge on the values that you need to add to your work. Okay, so here I'm adding the little streaks going inwards. So the the pink doesn't just suddenly end. There are little streaks going inwards, so I'm adding little bits here and there. Again, I don't have to add everything because, like I mentioned earlier, the eye will sort of fill it in. Okay, so I'm going to go over that all around, light streaks here and there. Okay, and already it's starting to look like they're going towards the center. Okay, so now we'll do that, the center part. Okay, so let me just get my color. Okay, so let's use some, let's use some green. Okay, phthalo green with a little bit of pink. Okay, so I get a kind of purplish tone, as you can see. So I will use that for the shadow. Okay, so this, using it instead of brown, will make it more harmonious with the pink and the yellow, because usually the bud, or the center of the flower will have some green in it because it's going to connect with the stem, and then we mix in the pink of the flower. So it's you're getting colors from your palette already and creating your shadow. So it won't come out suddenly on the other side of the spectrum, for example. So try to work with the colors in your palette, nothing too suddenly too extreme, especially when you're doing florals. So by mixing some green with the pink, I will use that for the shadow that I need to add to my work. Okay, I hope that made sense. Okay, so instead of using brown or gray or black for your shadows, try to mix a shadow color from the colors that you have. Okay, because I need a deeper color for the center of the flower. Okay, so let me just add some parts with more yellow in them. And then blend it with my shadow. Okay, so take your time, observe your reference photo, pay attention to the colors. Don't use a color that's too extreme. Here I'm trying to figure out where, okay, here. Sometimes you have to, when there's more details, you have to just stop and make sure you're doing the right sections. Okay. Some parts I totally did not add the pink, so I will work on that now. Okay, so really take your time. In my case, I'm of course trying to finish this within not too long, but of course when you're working realistically, take your time. Take more than 2 hours. Okay, don't hurry like me. So I'm adding, sometimes I add, when the paper is still wet, I add little dabs of color directly from the pan. That's fine, as long as you're applying it to a wet surface. But don't do that when the surface is dry, because, well, it's gonna end up like you're doing gouache or acrylic. Okay, so towards the center of the flowers, they have a pale yellowish color, so I will add that here and there. Using the same yellow I used earlier, the Hamsa. Then I will wait for that layer to dry before I add the shadows in. Okay, so this is where the sketch will come in handy because we need it to separate all the stems after. Okay, so this is a petal, so I'm going to add the streaks. The tiniest petal. Okay. So if you need to hasten the drying time, then you can always use your blow dryer if you have, which I will do so that you won't be waiting long. I just want to make sure everything is fully dry before I add the tiny details in, especially the shadowing. Because otherwise they will blend instead of layer, and I might end up with a muddy mixture, which I don't want, especially when I'm doing flowers. You actually want your colors to stay nice and beautiful. Okay, so again, adding the shadows in. Okay, so I'm working closely, so I tend to dip my wrist on my color. So take your time. Don't accidentally suddenly smudge color on your beautiful paper and beautiful work. Okay, so don't make the shadows too deep if they're not, because that will make your work dirty instead of, you know, just having natural shadows here and there. So by going with a more purplish shadow, I like it, rather than going with gray. It gives me a more harmonious look to my work. Okay, so this is again a mix of the pink that I'm using, opera pink, and phthalo green. So some sections have a deeper shadow because they are petals overlapping each other, like here and here. Okay, so just be careful not to dirty the sections that you want to remain pristine. You can just slowly build towards the shadow that you're looking for, so no need to hurry it. You can add just one layer, and if you feel like you need more, then you can just add again later on. Okay, so work in layers. Take your time, wait for things to dry, and judge once it's dry if maybe you need another layer or not. Okay, so really step by step. So don't worry, you will have a sketch for this so that you don't have to worry about how to sketch it out, which lines to include and such. I've sort of simplified it, but not too simple that you will have a hard time. Okay, so now I'll add a bit more green and yellow. So I'm mixing yellow with a little bit of phthalo green. to create the center. So again, adding things slowly, bit by bit. Okay, again, I'm going to dry because I'm going to work on the tiniest divisions at the middle. Okay, now I'm going to go with my gamboge, new gamboge, and then let's see, let's get from the classical. I'm going to use or no, let's use brown oxide from the same set. Okay, but since they're mixed up, I'm going to have to check. Is it this one? Okay, this one. Okay, so remember that our centers are very detailed. I'm going to switch to a small brush. Okay, this is the 5/0 round brush from the fine line. So I'm going to use this to paint this yellow parts because they have tiny pinpricks of color. But before that, I'm going to give it a wash of new gamboge, a deep yellow. Okay, because later when you do this for yourself, you'll see that the reference photo, it has a deeper yellow color. So I'm going to add it here to all of them. So because I did the first layer with Hamsa, it gives it that nice bright color, but now I'm dulling it a bit with this wash of new gamboge. So I'm just deepening the colors really. Gives it more depth rather than just adding gamboge. By doing it in layers, it gives your colors more depth, makes it more three-dimensional, you know. So try not to do so many shortcuts, and because they will really make a difference in your final work. So again, I'm just going to dry this quickly before I add the little pinpricks of detail. Okay, so you can use a heat gun or your blow dryer, whichever you have handy. Okay, so I'm going to mix gamboge, new gamboge. So it's a very golden yellow with a little bit of the brown oxide. Okay, so I just want a warm golden brown. So it's like this. Okay, if I swatch it, all right, there you go. So I'm using that to add the little details. Okay, so it's quite darker, so I'm gonna keep adding more pigment, make it darker. Okay, so make sure to prepare your mixture to how you like it, and then wipe your brush dry. Then get your prepared mixture and then do your dabs of texture. And you can also do layers of this. Okay, you can start with this first layer of mid brown, then you can later add a deeper mixture and add another layer. Okay, so even tiny details like this, you can work on it in layers. Okay, so no need to stress out if you don't get what you want to see on your first layer. Okay, you just work in layers and you'll get there. Okay, so just have patience. So in my case, I'm starting with this, just dotting them, and then later I can add more if I feel like I need a darker color. So maybe just using pure brown, no mix of yellow. Again, it will give it more dimension. So right now it looks like just yellow with pricks of brown, but if I add another layer after, it will really help. Okay, so just don't overdo it because you don't want to cover all the yellow. You actually want some of the bright yellow to pop through. Okay, again, dry it so that they don't mix and become muddy. And also because you want your layers to actually be separate. This pricks that you have, you want them to, you know, be separate from each other and not be just one huge blot of color. So when you're doing tiny layers like this, your brush must not be too wet because otherwise it's gonna create splotches instead of little dots. So wipe your brush dry before dipping it again into your mixture, and then do your details. So actually it's the darkest details create like a line, like horn actually, but not like a nice straight line, but I even dab the lines that I need to do. Okay, so do the same where you see a line-ish shape. Add darker browns to the section that are shadowed. Some parts are shadowed. So this is where you will really want to switch to a detail brush so that you can have the absolute control. Okay, so if you compare, this one is where you already have the 2 layers. Here, just one. You can already see the difference. Okay, so just keep working. You just have the patience to keep working on it. I know it's going to take time and patience, but again, you don't have to finish it in one go like me. You can do this in several sessions. Okay, the important thing is to enjoy the process, to learn from it while you're doing it. I've had so many versions of one work from before. If I'm not happy with something, it's always a learning experience. Nothing is wasted really. So, you know, by trial 1, trial 2, trial 3, sometimes you actually realize, oh, actually 1 was already great. You know, sometimes you're just too hard on yourself. So, but keep trying, you know. By constant practice, you will definitely progress into better works, better techniques. You get to know your materials, your colors, your brushes. Like me, I already have, you know, my favorite brushes. I'm sure you do too. Brushes that you always reach for, you know, because you already know the quirks. You know so well how to use your certain brushes. Like for example, I have more than 30 brushes, but I just used basically maybe 6 to 8 of them most of the time. Thanks, Joe. See you next time. Hey, don't worry, guys. We are nearly there. I'm just adding the final details. So this is the thing with realistic. The more that you layer and work. You go from big areas into smaller sections until you switch to these tiny brushes for the really extremely small details. But you don't have to do this. You don't have to do the little pricks that I'm doing. I just like it because I actually want the texture of the center to be there, because it really, I like the variety of textures. And okay, so again, don't overdo it because you don't want it to end up looking muddy. So I'm just gonna deepen the shadows in some areas. Okay, and using yellow, with some green. Okay, again, a lot of the work happens on your mixing area. Okay, just try to mix the mixture that you're looking for. Okay, so I used green, yellow, and the pink to create this like muddy green just for this center area where all the petals meet. Okay, so just add the little divisions here and there. Again, don't overdo it. Suggestive. You don't have to do everything because you actually don't want things to become muddy or too overly complicated. Suggestive, and the eye will take care of the rest. Just look at the Impressionist works, right? Viewed from afar, everything just comes together. But they're all just impressions and suggestions. Okay, and then I'm just adding Hansa yellow. I'm mixing Hansa yellow with gamboge. Okay, just to give this section deeper yellow. Okay, so since it's a creamy yellow, the shadows will be a warmer yellow. So really this is the finishing part. And then I will add a dash of green, just a dash. Okay, and there you have it. So I'll bring it close. Again, you can always leave it for now and then come back to it later. I really always recommend you take breaks, because sometimes your eyes get tired, your hands get tired, you're too much into it that you miss out on some of the details that you would normally see. So take breaks and you can come back to it and with fresher eyes. Okay, so this is the reference photo. Okay, and here is my finished work. Well, as finished as I can do in this time. Okay, I like it. It looks like a flower, which is what we're going for. It looks like a tulip, in my opinion. Okay, so instead of using browns or grays for the shadows, really by mixing pink with green, it gives me a more natural kind of shadow for this flower. It blends perfectly with the colors that I use for the other parts. Okay, So there's this other part here, but again, it's a background tulip. It's just a faded, washed out part, so nothing too complicated. So it's like a loose floral. Okay, so I'm going to pop back to my face now. Okay, so thank you for joining me, guys. And here it is. Here's the size of this. I'm going to do the extra tulip, but for this session, this is long enough, and I think this is the important part for you to see anyway, because it's the very detailed and more complicated part. So basically, 3 to 4 layers, and you get to finish a flower that looks like this. Okay, so I hope you guys learned from this live painting, and I hope you try it out. And if you do, don't forget to share it with a group, so more people will be inspired to try it out as well. Even though it looks complicated, by following the step-by-step, by breaking it down, working in sections, you can totally do this. Okay, so watch out for the sketch and the reference photo. I will share it after this session. So I will share it here on the event itself, and tomorrow when I post the replay of the live, I will also add it there. Okay, so thank you guys. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you found it useful, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a great day. Bye.